1/4, fractions and decimals. Our objective today is to convert between fractions and decimals. New vocabulary is terminating decimal and repeating decimal. A terminating decimal is a decimal that stops. For example, 0.21 stops. That is a terminating decimal. A repeating decimal is a decimal with a block of digits that repeats without end. Our symbol for that, for example, if it's 0.3 and the 3 repeats forever, just a little line over the 3. So to turn a fraction into a decimal, we long divide the numerator by the denominator. If the fraction is negative, we do the same thing and just add the negative sign at the end. So let's do some examples. We take the numerator, 1, divided by the denominator, 2. Well, we know 2 doesn't go into 1, so we have to add a decimal and a 0 after the decimal. 2 goes into 10 5 times with nothing left over, so my answer is 0.5. For 1/8, I put the 1 underneath, the 8 outside. 8 doesn't go into 1, so I add a decimal and a 0. 8 goes into 10 one time, so I take my 8 and I have 2 left over. So now I add another 0. We do not want remainders. Bring my 0 down. 8 goes into 20 2 times, which gives me 16. Subtract and I get 4. Add another 0, bring it down. 8 goes into 40 5 times. 40 with nothing left over. So my final answer is 0.125. For 3/4, I put the 3 underneath, the 4 outside. 4 does not go into 3, so I add a decimal and a 0 behind. 4 goes into 37 times, which makes 28 with 2 left over, so I add another 0 and bring it down. 4 goes into 25 times with nothing left over, so my answer is 0.75. For 1/5, I put my 1 underneath, my 5 outside. 5 doesn't go into 1, so I add a decimal and a 0. 5 goes into 10 2 times with nothing left over, so my answer is 0.2. Now let's write 3/11 as a decimal. So 3 goes underneath, the 11 goes outside. 11 doesn't go into 3, so I add my decimal and a 0. 11 goes into 32 times. I get 22, I subtract, I have 8 left over. Bring down a 0. 11 goes into 87 times, which makes 77 with 3 left over. Add a 0, bring it down. 11 goes into 32 times, 22. When I subtract, I'll get 8. You notice that this same pattern is going to repeat over and over. So my answer is actually going to be 0.27 repeating. Both the 2 and the 7 are repeating. If I were to check this with a calculator, so in my calculator I plug in 3 divided by 11. It's going to say something like 0.272727273. Your calculator is going to round that last number to make it fit. So you have to be careful if you're ever checking this with a calculator. This is actually meaning a repeating decimal, and it just rounded at the end. So try this one. Write 5/9 as a decimal. To do this, we put the 5 underneath, the 9 outside. 9 doesn't go into 5, so I add a 0. 9 goes into 55 times. Makes 45 with 5 left over. Bring down a 0. Goes into 55 times. 45. Subtract. I got 5 left over. Notice that it's going to repeat. My answer is 0.5 repeating. Our next example is going to be to write 0.25 as a fraction in simplest form. To do this, we are going to write the digits to the right of the decimal point as a fraction. So the 25 is our numerator. The denominator is the place value of the last digit. Our last digit is the 5. That is in the hundredths place, so our denominator is 100. Now we simplify. I know that 25 goes into both of these. So my answer is 1/4. Now let's try these. 0.7. Well, I'd write my decimal without the decimal. The place value of the last digit is the tenths place, so it's 7/10, and that does not reduce. 0.4 will be 4/10 because the place value is the tenths. I know that 2 goes into both of these, so I get 2/5 as my reduced version. And 0.15, write it without the decimal. The 5 is in the hundredths place, so it's over 100. Then I reduce. I know 5 goes into both of these, so I get 3/20, and that does not reduce, so I'm done. All right, now these are when it gets a little tricky. To do this, we're going to do the same exact thing. Write it without the decimal, 1,364, over the place value of the last digit is 1/1000. And now I just reduce. I know that 4 goes into both of these. So divide the top and the bottom by 4, and we will get 341 over 250. Now, you'll notice that this is not a mixed number, it's an improper fraction. Improper fractions are fine. That is totally acceptable. So let's do the next one. Write it without the decimal, 248 over. The place value of the last digit is hundredths. Now we reduce. 4 goes into both of these. So I get 62 over 25. And 3.6, write it without the decimal. Place value of the last digit is tenths. Divide to simplify. 2 goes into both of these. So I get 18 over 5. Now we're going to order these from greatest to least. We have 2, 2.55, and 2 and 6/18. To do this, you can either write the decimals as fractions or the fractions as decimals. I personally find it easier to write the fractions as decimals. And in this case, we only have one that we would need to change. Let's change 2 and 6/18 into a decimal. Well, the 2 is the easy part, so we're going to ignore it for now. So we're going to look at the 6/18. I know that 6 goes into both of these, so I'm going to simplify. I get 1/3. Let's write 1/3 as a decimal. So I take 1 divided by 3, add my decimal and my 0. 3 goes into 10 3 times with 1 left over. Bring down another 0, I get 3 again. Oh, sorry, that should have been a 9 there. We got 1 left over. You'll notice it's going to be 0.3 repeating. So 2 and 6/18 is 2.3 repeating. So now I've got 2, 2.55, and 2.3 repeating to put in order. The greatest of these is 2.55 because we look at the first number behind the decimal first. Well, I've got a 0, a 5, and a 3. The 5 is the biggest. 2.55. 2.3 repeating would be next. We want to write it in its original form, so 2 and 6/18. And finally, 2 is the smallest of these. So try this one. Order from greatest to least. 1 and 3/8, 1 and 7/15, or 1 and 862,000. All right, since I've already done these, I know 1 and 3/8 is equal to 1.375. And I know 1 and 7/15 is equal to 1.46, just the 6 is repeating. So to put these in order, the greatest of these is going to be 1.862. Between the remaining two, 1.46 repeating is bigger, so that means 1 and 7/15 comes next. And finally, 1 and 3/8. Your assignment is the fraction and decimal worksheet.